Today is Tuesday, August 25th, 2026, and today is National Banana Split Day. 3 scoops of ice cream nestled between a split banana, drowned in syrup, whipped cream, nuts, and a cherry on top. It's the kind of dessert that feels like pure excess, and somehow still makes perfect sense once you take the first bite. That spirit of delightful excess leads us somewhere stranger today. A newspaper that convinced half the country the moon was crawling with life. A French Canadian who planted a city in a swamp that had no business succeeding. And a single signature that decided which piece of America would be protected forever. Welcome to Wait, That's Random, This Day in History. I'm C.L. Burns, voice actor, audiobook narrator, and someone who's discovered that history usually gets more interesting the moment you ask one more question. Picture a New York City newsboy in the summer of 1835, hawking a 1-cent paper called The Sun. The headline on August 25th stopped people cold. Great astronomical discoveries lately made by Sir John Herschel at the Cape of Good Hope. According to the story, the famous British astronomer had built a telescope so powerful it could pick out insects on the lunar surface. What he found, the paper claimed, was astonishing. Lush forests, inland seas, white sand beaches, herds of miniature bison, playful goat-like creatures, and the creatures that made readers drop their coffee, 4-foot-tall beings covered in copper-colored hair, with thin membrane wings folded across their backs. The paper called them Vespertilio Homo, man-bats. They built temples, they held conversations, they had a civilization. There were even bipedal beavers that carried their young in their arms and constructed huts better than many human tribes. None of it was true. The Edinburgh Journal of Science, the paper claimed to be reprinted from, had shut down years earlier. The supposed colleague of Herschel, Dr. Andrew Grant, never existed. Sir John Herschel himself was indeed at the Cape of Good Hope at the time, mapping the southern sky, but he had seen no forests, no bison, and certainly no bat people. The whole series was the work of a Sun reporter named Richard Adams Locke, who later said he meant it as satire. Most readers didn't get the joke. Circulation exploded. Pamphlets of the articles sold by the tens of thousands. For weeks, people across America and Europe debated the new lunar inhabitants as if they were established fact. Scientists from Yale even traveled to New York hoping to see the original reports. The Sun eventually admitted the hoax on September 16th, but by then the damage and the delight had been done. America had spent the better part of a month believing the moon was full of life. And once you've watched an entire city swallow a story that wild, it's hard not to notice how often we invent the places we want to believe in. Which brings us to a very different kind of invention. One more than a century earlier on a muddy bend of the Mississippi River. In the spring of 1718, a French Canadian named... Why can't these people be named like Bill Smith? Jean-Baptiste Lemoyne de Bienville stepped ashore on a low, swampy crescent of land about 30 leagues up from the mouth of the Mississippi. The Company of the West, back in Paris, had ordered a new settlement there, a port of deposit, that could control traffic on the Great River and still connect to the Gulf through Lake Pontchartrain and the Bayou St. John. They named it La Nouvelle Orléans, in honor of the French regent Philippe, Duke of Orléans. Bienville looked at the site and saw a possibility. Almost everyone else saw problems. The ground was soggy, the river flooded, mosquitoes swarmed. Hurricanes would eventually smash the place twice in the first 4 years. The first residents were a mix of soldiers, craftsmen, convicts, indentured service, and enslaved Africans living in crude bark and reed shelters. Yet Bienville kept pushing. He had the streets laid out in a neat grid that still form the French Quarter today. He fought off rivals who wanted the capital kept at Mobile or Biloxi, and somehow, against the odds, the little settlement held. Within a few years, it became the capital of French Louisiana. Within a few generations, it had grown into one of the most cultural distinct cities in North America. Music, food, architecture, and attitude that feel like nowhere else on the continent. All of it started with a stubborn decision to plant a city where the land itself seemed to argue against the idea. And once a place like that takes root, against the floods, the insects, the pure improbability of it, you start to wonder what else is worth protecting on purpose. In the summer of 1916, Congress finally answered that question for the wild places America had already set aside. On August 25th, President Woodrow Wilson signed the National Park Service Organic Act. The new agency was given a dual charge that still shapes every park visit today: conserve the scenery, the natural and historic objects, and the wildlife, and provide for the enjoyment of the same, in such a manner and by such means as will leave them unimpaired for the enjoyment of future generations. Before that day, the parks existed, but they were scattered under different departments with uneven protection. The Organic Act pulled most of them under one roof and wrote the mission in plain language. It was both a preservation law and an invitation. The parks would not be locked away. They would be open, but they would also be held in trust. That tension, use them, but don't use them up, has been the quiet argument at the heart of the National Park Service ever since. Thinking about places that get reinvented or protected or simply believed into being brings one particular life into focus. He was born in a one-room tenement in Edinburgh's Fountain Bridge neighborhood, a place that smelled of rubber mills and breweries. The family shared a toilet in the stairwell and had no hot water. He left school at 13 or 14 and went to work delivering milk by horse and cart. He polished coffins. He laid bricks. He joined the Royal Navy, got 2 tattoos, Scotland forever and Mom and Dad. He was invalided out with stomach ulcers. He worked as a lifeguard, a laborer, and an artist model at the Edinburgh College of Art, where students later remembered him as almost too beautiful to draw. He was good enough at football that Manchester United showed interest. At 23, he stood at a crossroads. Accept a professional soccer contract or keep chasing the stage. He chose the stage. A few years later, that same working-class Scotsman with a rough Edinburgh accent stepped in front of a camera as a secret agent named Bond. James Bond. The tuxedo, the dry wit, the cool authority. None of it matched the tenement childhood or the milk rounds. Yet it stuck. He became the first and for many people still the definitive cinematic 007. Today we're talking about the one and only Sean Connery, born on August 25th, 1930. What stays with me now is how thoroughly he reinvented the surface while never quite erasing the original material. The accent remained. The toughness remained. The sense that this was a man who had already lived several lives before the camera ever rolled. Looking back across the day, it feels like a chain of reinventions. A newspaper inventing a living moon. A stubborn French Canadian inventing a city in a swamp. A young nation inventing a way to keep its wildest places intact. And a kid from Fountain Bridge inventing a version of himself the whole world would recognize. Anyway, if you're celebrating National Banana Split Day, maybe skip the Lunar bison and just go for 3 scoops. Some inventions are better left on the page. Which reminds me of a line that fits a day full of impossible things. Why, sometimes I've believed as many as 6 impossible things before breakfast. Lewis Carroll. If you'd like to hear more of my work, audiobooks, or other projects I've managed to get myself involved in, you can find everything at waitthat'srandom.com. I'm C.L. Burns, and honestly, thanks for spending a little time being curious with me. I'll see you tomorrow.